After playing the likes of Dusk, A Medieval, and Ultra Kill, I've got to say I couldn't be happier with the resurgence of good quality retro-style shooters coming out. This time around it's CULTIC, a blood-like old-school FPS made by solo developer Jason Smith and published by 3D Realms. Now before we start, I just want to say that for a one-man dev team, this guy has pulled out all the stops in making sure that you could taste the nostalgia of any great classic shooter in CULTIC. With that being said, like, comment, and subscribe for more content, and let's get right into it. The opening scene shows multiple disappearances in the early 60s, where our detective is handed in his gun and badge after being taken off the case, but chooses to continue his investigation alone despite all the danger. Rolling up to an asylum and being promptly dumped into a pile of bodies, this is where we're given control of our nameless protagonist. I have to say that I really like the opening, as it gives a nice retro noir feeling from the music to the stylish cinematic cuts of every shot. It sets the tone perfectly for the action that's about to ensue. And it wastes no time in throwing us right into the middle of things without any superfluous story to get in the way. As far as the story is concerned, it turns out another investigator by the name of Christopher Holloway has been here before you, trying to suss out the cult's shady dealings, and mentions yet another missing person through all these journals that you can find scattered throughout the game. Besides a few other articles here and there that are pretty much entirely optional, the story is mainly told through the level design, giving enough context clues to figure stuff out for yourself. All in all, the environmental storytelling does a good enough job that you don't really need to stop and read anything to get the gist of what's happening. As for the gameplay, it's pretty solid. You get not only a variety of guns and explosives in your arsenal, but can even interact with just about everything, like tossing lanterns as an improvised Molotov, or if that's not enough, jibbing a guy and then chucking his eyeballs at somebody else's head. How's that for morbid? Adding on to the combat, weapons feel impactful and carry some hefty weight behind their attacks. Provided you're not aiming anywhere but the head, that is, given the minimal locational damage enemies take. This means they'll shrug off repeated magnum rounds to the chest, while their heads are prone to popping like a blood fountain at the slightest provocation. The visceral feedback at the spectacle feels really satisfying while you're busy gunning down hordes of onesie-wearing wankers from the very first level onwards. There's a good variety of weapons to choose from, be it your hatchet that you can swing like a madman or charge up to hack your enemies to pieces with. It even has a ranged attack that lets you straight up obliterate cultists if you can land a headshot. Hell, you can even catch enemy-thrown hatchets out of the air, which the timing is precise to the point of being impractical to do, but you can do it. The guns themselves are mostly period pieces, given that it's set in the 60s, and they each manage to serve a purpose without overlapping one another's role too much. This is further apparent when you take into consideration the alternate firing modes and upgrades available for each. Being able to find weapon parts scattered throughout each map that lets you improve your arsenal at a workbench, including such things as faster cycling speed for the lever action rifle, an option for each to deal more damage, or higher capacity for your submachine gun, which admittedly felt a little redundant given it can already hold 50 rounds. There's also a burst fire for the pistol, which I'm glad to say actually makes it viable from start to finish, especially once it's fully kitted out with upgrades, being capable of head-popping baddies on the regular. And any game is immediately improved by including an FG-42, which has to be one of my favorite weapons of all time. Here it's pretty beefy, with the only major drawback being its limited ammo supply. Outside of that, the shotgun does feel a bit inconsistent to start with, having trouble hitting things at any range that isn't within reach of simply jamming it down their throat. Like here, where RNG decides to dick me and hit everything but the guy I was aiming at. Yeah, okay guy. After getting the choke upgrade, I didn't suffer from that problem anymore, and it became a certified murder machine. Honestly, the only upgrade I felt underwhelming had to be the Deadeye for the lever action rifle. It allows your alt fire to trigger jib time on demand, which is basically just slow-mo, provided that you can land headshots with it. That sounds great in theory, but in practice I found it rather lackluster since the window of opportunity it gives you is so minor. Not to mention that alt fire is less accurate than primary fire, so landing those shots in the first place can be a bit difficult. Even after dumping all my upgrade points into it, I still came out only half-mast. That's really the only one I could do with any changes. I have to admit I wasn't expecting regenerating health. It wasn't until about an hour in that I even realized it was a thing. As it turns out, you'll recover back to 25 health very slowly, which is a nice little buffer against getting randomly sniped by a stray bullet where you're scrounging around looking for a medkit. There's also 2 separate types of armor, ballistic and blast, to help cushion against different damage types, in addition to a field kit that lets you store up to 100 hit points for an on-demand way of healing, which I can't stress enough is so useful for surviving those rougher encounters or when you go one ball too deep into waves of enemies. It even replenishes itself by adding half the value of pickups when you're at full health, which is such a nice quality of life feature that I'm genuinely surprised more games don't do this. Oh, and you're also able to carry around a ludicrous amount of dynamite and molotovs, which are useful for blowing up not just enemies, but secret areas through cracks in the walls. Or, you know, for doing nothing at all. Either way, they both have their own little tricks, and they have several ways you can use them. Like quick throwing an unlit block of dynamite to the ground to manually shoot and detonate it when someone comes near. Otherwise, you can light it up before determining the force of your throw, but then there's also the ult fire that lets you unwrap the bundle first and turn it into a bunch of multiple mini blasts instead. On top of that, you can combine it with a Molotov to make a ridiculous cocktail that'll explode and set things on fire, which is always satisfying. The sprite work for it looks great too, seriously, it never gets old, I love it so much. Honestly, all of the animations look fantastic, they're retro and smooth as hell. I was pleasantly surprised they're able to manage that. I really appreciate how there's even different reload animations, depending on whether your weapon's empty or not. Flicking that loading strip for the Mauser pistol is so satisfying. You just yeet! You can also see your legs whenever you're sliding around to avoid incoming fire, as well as holding crouch when falling, which enables you to roll and negate some of the fall damage you would have taken otherwise. And while you can use the dodge to avoid attacks, you can also be cheeky by using it to move super fast during the vent crawling and underwater sections. Admittedly, all these keys can make the alt control shift area pretty busy, so some rebinding may be necessary for easier access. Also, being a 3D Realms published game, of course there's a mighty boot button. The expanded movement system helps to make up for the inability to move at ludicrous speeds like other older shooters, yet it still gives off that impression of speed through all the different animations as you dive, slide, and roll around during fights. Although you can make up for this less than breakneck speed a little bit by chaining the jump kick together. It can be a little difficult to get the timing down right, but the jump kick gives you some added momentum, so pulling it off lets you make up for your otherwise slower speed. It also lets you access certain areas earlier than you'd otherwise be able to, like grabbing the stand in the mines early, in case you missed picking it up in the previous level. Now, whether or not this is a bug or a feature, I'm not sure, but it does have its niche uses. I really have to reiterate how much I dig the aesthetics of CULTIC. The art design is on point, having that old school look, while still having subtle effects like the fog rolling in at the shipyard, as well as the water effects along the underside of the boats. Just small touches like that is what gives it so much personality. The same goes for using your lighter to illuminate your surroundings, which it's really not cut out for doing, but this helps heighten the atmosphere and tension when you're trudging along a pit full of hanging corpses in the first level. Using the lighter also restricts the use of your two-handed weapons, up until you get a lantern about halfway through, which honestly, the biggest downside is that you can no longer cycle your rifle one-handed like the Terminator anymore. It's a serious downgrade. It is a nice touch that all the cultists are left-handed though, that's how you really know the heretics. In all seriousness, when it comes to the graphics, the only thing that was a little iffy is perhaps the voxel bodies strewn around the environment looking a bit out of place, especially when compared to the sprites of enemies. I get that they needed to be 3D since they're sometimes holding keys and stuff, but it does look a little jarring when you put them side by side. That's honestly really minor though, and other than that, the only oddities that are cool are a fake tree that you can clip through in the sniper level, then parts of the map disappearing when sliding. I guess that goes to show the power of my mighty boot, even the terrain gets out of the way. As far as the enemies are concerned, their cast is pretty extensive. Sure, you've got your basic run-of-the-mill cultists and their Wolfenstein SS counterparts, as well as your zombies that leap at you like discount Left 4 Dead hunters, but then you've also got your skull monsters and skellies with guns. Rattle 'em, boys! The lead up before introducing a new enemy type is usually well done too, whether that be introducing them in a straight up boss battle hidden just out of view, or in the case of ghosts, having you discover them after finding the captain of a cargo ship pinned to the ceiling like it's a bloody horror movie. As it turns out, they're just female cultists that float around and lob furniture at you. Oh, and also have the habit of holding you in place, making you susceptible to being mauled by all the enemies bum rushing you while you're stuck at a snail's pace. I hate them so much. I mean, I like them, but god damn do I hate them. My favorite may have to be the giant walking mouth for a chest though. It looks vaguely related to the gaping dragon, and I liked how it had 3 different versions of getting around and modes of attacking up close and at range. I don't know, I just think they're kinda neat. He's a goofy guy. Even the basic assortment of cultists have enough varieties to make for prioritizing targets over others. Shields, for example, being a pain to chew through with 9mm ammo, but being easily hacked through with your hatchet or a couple of shotgun blasts. The snipers, however, are just complete gits. It's worth mentioning that CULTIC does have the trope of introducing a boss enemy that then gets demoted to being a regular recurring one, which is whatever, but what's less forgivable is that their AI can be a bit primitive, such as larger enemies getting stuck behind barrels or being too big to fit through bloody doors and other tight spots that are liable for cheesing. At least some of them do have workarounds. Usually they can be kited rather easily, but they're tanky, and if you make the mistake of letting them get too close, they can and will mess you up. The rate at which new enemies are introduced is paced pretty well, not blowing their load all at once, but instead slowly doling them out as you progress through each level, of which there's 10 at release in the main campaign, and outside of 2 boss levels, each map can be pretty expansive, having a lot of different areas that join together and flow into one another, while having a lot of verticality to them. Even the first map was surprisingly longer than I anticipated for an opening level, including several cliff sections to descend, while having overlooks that could be a real pain if you don't pay attention and pick off the ranged enemies waiting for your approach. Then there's also the fact that levels are littered with secrets, from extra ammo and health pickups to grabbing a weapon early or permanent health upgrades and weapon parts. It has to be said that some of the 50 secrets can be pretty obscure, and more than 20% of them are on the first level. Not since Dark Forces 2 have I felt a major tick punch this severe whenever I was reminded of all the things I missed at the map cleared screen. Nice try, buddy. Since then, I've gone and committed them all to memory, but even then I feel like I might have missed some stuff since I still don't have enough components to fully upgrade all my weapons by the end. It's genuinely making me paranoid. I really wish that they would show you how many you can find per level just like the secrets, since it's just making me crazy. But either way, it's still enough to upgrade all but maybe 1 or 2 things by the end. It's not a big deal. Matching the great visuals of the game, the sound design is equally amazing. The weapons are loud and crunchy, especially when it comes to popping melons. I legit left the title theme running the first time around so I could listen to the full song before getting into the game. That shit slaps hard. The ambience is also a perfect fit while exploring, and it kicks into high gear when the combat starts. Unstoppable from the first level also goes pretty hard. At one point, I had to double check thinking that this was composed by someone like Andrew Holschel, it's just that good, but no, it turns out it was entirely made by the same guy that did the rest of the game. Jason Smith is just a man of many talents it seems, and you can tell he poured his everything into CULTIC. It's worth mentioning that the 5 difficulties for the campaign are pretty fairly balanced, mostly being an increase in the quantity, damage output, and toughness of enemies, resulting in making even the most basic of pistol-wielding cultists a credible threat. When things can kill you near instantly is when it really feels bad about the camera punching whenever the player gets hit that throws your aim off by a mile. Aside of the main campaign, there's also a survival mode with a full leaderboard and everything. It's your pretty standard buy items, kill waves of enemies, repeat affair. There's 3 levels to choose from that are loosely based on maps or locations from the main game that can be pretty fun to play. There's really nothing major or outstanding about it, just being a competent and fun enough horde mode that's carried by CULTIC's good solid gunplay. Having grown up on OG shooters, I can say that CULTIC manages to do them justice by keeping that old school shooter look and feel, while flawlessly adding modern mechanics like expanded movement controls. The whole thing feels like a mix-up of Blood and Duke Nukem 3D, with some of the atmosphere straight out of Return to Castle Wolfenstein. Having a 4 or 5 hour campaign, plus survival mode, 50 secrets, and upgrade paths for weapons, making for some replay value to try out different combinations on repeat playthroughs, there's quite a bit of value for money here at the $10 mark, and CULTIC honestly feels like the gold standard of what retro shooters should be. Chapter 1 was nothing short of fantastic, and if 2 is anywhere near as good as this, then I can't wait, it'll be an instant buy. As always, cheers for watching, keep on smiling, and I'll see you all in the next video.